Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Comp 1 students. So we have finished up the eulogy essay, and now we're moving on to the analysis essay. There are many types of analysis that you can do in writing. There are literary analysis, which some of you are very familiar with from high school, reading a poem, breaking it down, reading a story and breaking it down. Or there is what we refer to as rhetorical analysis, and that is what we're going to engage in. And we're also going to be engaging specifically in the ad critique for analysis. But I want to talk about analysis first and give you a good understanding of it so when you do the ad critique, you know how to go about it. So, the learning outcomes for this, there are going to be 5 specific areas that we're going to be discussing. There's going to be reading critically and thinking analytically, a guide to active reading, 7 strategies for critical reading, the 3 proofs in rhetorical analysis, and then we're going to talk about the essay itself. When it comes down to reading critically and thinking analytically, this is something that most of you do every day, but you probably just do not think about it. Being able to read critically and think analytically about what you read and what you consume in media is very important because you have access to news and other things at the tip of your fingers 24/7. And not all things that you see should be trusted immediately. Burden of proof thing. Reading critically is going to allow you to look deeper into things, while thinking analytically makes you question what you read and the validity of those things, as well as the importance and the impact of them. These are going to be skills that you're going to use throughout your college career and even life, okay? So having a good understanding about what they are and how to do both of these things will help you out in the long run. So what I want to talk about first are the critical things. The first question we want to ask ourselves is, what is critical reading? Critical reading itself is analyzing a text closely through cultural, ethical, and political perspectives. When you're looking at a text, the cultural aspect of the person is being used to write, and it always is, your background, your culture. The ethical stance of the person is also coming through, as well as the political perspective of not only the person, but what is going on at the time. These things are all playing a part in what is written, how it's written, and why it's written. You are going to adopt an inquiring and skeptical stance toward the text. So you're going to look at it and be like, should I trust it? Allowing you to explore beyond its apparent meaning. This applies to all things, not just written text. So when you look at advertisements or you watch a video, you watch the news, you are thinking about these things and applying them. It says reading, but it's also going to apply to consuming things, not literally. And that is what critical reading applies to. Critical reading is not discovering the hidden or real meaning of a text. When somebody writes, generally they're not writing with the intention of having a hidden meaning or a real meaning hidden in the text. Not intentionally. Sometimes people are going to write books intentionally like that, but generally stuff there's no hidden or real meaning to things. So keep that in mind. What do you do as a critical reader? You're going to employ 5 tactics as a critical reader to be a critical reader. The first is ask insightful and challenging questions. That is going to force you to look beyond the text and your own assumptions and understanding as a reader. So you should look at a text and not just think, what is it saying, but think, why is it saying this? How is it saying these things? What are they using? And even challenge your own beliefs and your own assumptions while reading something. The second is going to be figuring out why people believe some things and then are skeptical of others. This is something that is very hard to do as a person. But as a critical reader, you need to be able to try to understand somebody else's mindset. So you can engage in discussion with them to understand why they believe what they believe and why they have written down what they have written. I know it's hard, but you've got to start setting aside your own strong beliefs and trying to say, why does somebody believe this? And then engaging with them because you want them to feel like you understand them. Same thing with somebody's talking with you. The third thing is you're going to evaluate the reasoning and authority emotion. You're going to evaluate the reasoning, authority, and emotion in the text. So these are what we're going to refer to as the 3 proofs. And we'll talk about them later, but they're used in everything in some way. and looking at how they're used is going to help you better understand the text and better understand arguments, and also help you learn how to spot them and maybe how to use them in your own writing as well. Number 4 is you're going to contextualize the text culturally, ethically, and politically. So when you get further into this course and you're writing your argument, you're going to hear me say contextualize the source in your argument. Put it in context. Why are you using this information? How does it apply? When you're looking at a text, you need to understand why it's written and who it's written by. So understanding those 3 things, the cultural, ethical, and political background of these, will help you understand why it was written. If you look at things like slave narratives, they're written to give people a better understanding of slavery from the slave's viewpoint. If you look at things like war poetry, World War I poetry especially, it's written by people who are soldiers or who have had experience with soldiers, and they're discussing the horrors of war. Understanding what's going on at that time, though, helps you better understand it. If you read World War I poetry, we do not often engage in gas warfare anymore, where we use things like mustard gas, but that was a lot of World War I. So you need to understand that kind of climate. What was it like ethically for them? Political climates all shape text and what's going on. So keep those 3 things in mind when you're looking at a text of any kind. That includes understanding when it was made. So things from 1800 are very different mindset than now. Then you want to analyze the text based on your values and beliefs. Last one, you have to understand where you stand with your values and your belief systems, because that's going to shape how you react to a text when you first read it. Knowing, okay, I believe this is why I reacted this way. From there, you'll be able to read it again, but more critically. So keep those things in mind. Why are these important? How do you become a good writer? By being a critical reader. So you need to be a critical reader in order to be a good writer. You need to be critical of everything, including yourself. In order to do this, there's going to be 2 ways that you're going to employ this. You're going to be looking through the text and looking at the text. These are 2 very different things. What is looking through a text? That is where you look at a text and the content to understand just the main points. So what does the text say? That's all you're looking at. Look through it. What does it say? This paragraph says this paragraph says this paragraph says this. That's all you're looking at. And then when you look at a text, you're going to explore why the author made particular choices, like the genre, persuasion, strategies, style, and even diction. Diction is the way somebody speaks in their writing. Keep that thing in mind. It's going to be very important for understanding how people approach discussion styles. And a lot of people are going to write, especially in academics, in a more convoluted way, convoluted for yourself, convoluted way than you're used to reading. You have to be like, why are you writing like this? I don't understand. But if they write in a certain style or they're employing certain strategies, maybe they choose certain language to use, it is all very important to understand and to make note of, because it is shaping that text and how it's going to be received. Critical readers are going to engage in both looking through and at the text to better understand the influences that shape the writing of the text. So please keep that in mind. In order to critically read, you need to actively read. This is something that I know a lot of people struggle with. It is a main key to critical reading, is actively reading. And I know you're sitting here and you're thinking, she said reading. I hate that. And I get it. I truly do. But active reading is important. So let's talk about active reading. How do you as a person actively read? How do you do this? If you've never been taught, these are the things that I want you to do. So employ the below on here to become a better active reader. Before reading, you're going to preview. So you're going to look and then you're going to read and form. So previewing is you're going to look at everything that the text says. Title, subtitle, author, maybe preview the introduction or the first paragraph, any headings that happen in the writing, and you'll see headings and things that are longer. It'll be like, here's a section of writing that have like a larger font with a heading, like a title. Those are all things that you need to look at because they'll give you an idea of what the text is going to be about in general. Not from reading, just from looking at it ahead of time. Write those down. Then I want you to look at the photographs, tables, charts, and drawings if they're there. Not everything uses those, but if they have them, make note of those. They highlight very important information. That's why they exist. So you need to be like, all right, this is here. It's important information to this page. I need to keep this in mind when I'm reading. And the last thing you're going to do is read and form. So you're going to read the conclusion or summary, and then you're going to read any end of assignment questions. So sometimes you'll get questions, and then you'll form questions to guide your reading. So reading the conclusion and summary, the conclusion and introduction, sorry about that, guys, is going to give you a better understanding of the text. Remember, your introduction gives me a broad understanding that then narrows down to what this argument or your writing is about. The conclusion wraps it up, so you get a good idea. If you're looking at end of assignment questions, if you have like questions you need to answer afterwards, knowing that you need to look for those things while reading makes you engage in the reading more. And then forming your own questions if you need to. Why am I reading this? Where are we going at? How is this going to be important? Those kind of things can help you. They don't have to be like philosophical questions. It can be basic questions. Then while you're reading, you're going to examine, highlight, annotate, and figure it out. You're going to examine the key elements. They're going to better help you understand the text as a whole. The key elements from your before reading are the title and subtitles, if they exist, introduction, author's main point, their thesis statement, support and explanation, so what each paragraph is about and the support they bring into it, and then conclusion. Then highlight key points. When you're reading, highlighting is a great thing to do, but please remember that highlighting isn't highlighting everything. It's main things, the big words, things that you know you're going to need to know. When you do the before reading, those are things that you can look for, and it'll help give you an idea of what to highlight. So determine what kind of information you need to highlight. If you know the sort of reading you're doing, what do you need to know from it to highlight? Read first, then highlight. Don't highlight as you read, because a lot of people will just highlight huge swaths of paragraphs, and that's not helpful. Highlight key elements, words, and phrases only. Elements, little things, words, couple words, and phrases, short phrases. Do not highlight the entire thing. That is not helpful to you at all. Then you're going to annotate. So annotate is going to be where you write down notes and questions while you read. If you look at one of my books that I used while I was in college, especially the later on I went through my degrees, a lot of my books have writing in the margins. A lot of writing, actually. That's annotations. Those are notes or questions or just comments you have to the reading. And it is very important. This is one reason why, if you're going to do a lot of reading, if you want to keep the book, that's a good thing. You can write in your own books. If you're not going to, I highly suggest making sure that you know where you're writing the notes and questions to. I did it before where I wrote notes, but I didn't like make note of where I was making the notes at, and my notes make no sense now. But write them in the margins. If you have a question that comes up while you're reading something, you don't understand it, make note of it. So if it never gets answered and you're talking about this with an instructor or someone, you can say, hey, I have a question about this. It didn't get answered in the writing. Can you answer it for me? Then you're going to figure it out. So figuring it out is where you're going to just figure out the meaning of things. So sometimes you're going to run into words that you just aren't familiar with. You don't know what they mean. If you have words like that, look for clues in the surrounding text. What is the text talking about? You can kind of figure it out that way. You can pronounce the words aloud, look at parts of the word if you know like prefixes and suffixes, or just use your phone. And the last one for reading is understanding. So you need to be able to understand challenging readings. That's the whole point of doing them. You are going to get challenging readings the further on you go into a college program and a degree. It's just part of it. Being able to read challenging things and understanding them is key in being an active reader. Please keep in mind, though, that it may take a couple of read-throughs of the thing. Not always one read-through is going to be helpful to get you through it. And after reading, the last thing, you're going to review and reread. So review all of your notes, summarize, review the annotations and highlightings that you made. Write your summary as you reread each paragraph. Summary is where you put things in your own words and you give me the main points. So that's very helpful if you're not understanding at all what something is doing. Try to summarize each paragraph. Start your summary with an opening sentence that states in your own words the author's thesis. Include the author's supporting ideas, and then present the ideas in the order in which they appear in the original source. So doing a summary can really help you break down a hard to understand reading, because if you're putting in your own words, being able to explain it to yourself, it helps you better understand it. And then reread your summary and determine whether it has sufficient information. If you know it's missing something, like you made a note of back in the highlighting or the previewing, if you looked at something, you were like, I didn't mention this graph information, that's probably something you need to mention because it's going to be important. So the rereading helps you go back through, relook at it, and then contextualize it all. And that is going to be your active reading. It sounds like a lot, guys, but once you start engaging in active reading, once you start sitting down and making a concerted effort to actively read, it's a lot easier to do. When you actively read, you are also going to critically read. Okay, so there are 7 strategies for critical reading. All right, you have 7 strategies for critical reading. They're all on the screen for you. So I'm going to talk through each of them. The first one is previewing the text. Previewing allows you to better gain an understanding of the text as you read instead of struggling to understand after the fact. That's why in the active reading it mentions previewing. When reading, size up the text. Some questions you can ask yourself are, what are the major features of this text? Does it have anything besides writing? What is the purpose of this text? What genre is the text following? And genre is key. I know some of you think about genre in terms of like science fiction, horror, but that's not just genre. And then what is your initial response to the text when you look at it? Another strategy is play the believing and doubting game. You mostly do this a lot of the time anyway, but it's a very helpful tool to have. So the believing and doubting game is useful because it's going to help you understand all sides of the text. The believing game itself is where you are someone who, 1, believes what the author says is sound, interesting, important. Wholeheartedly believe it. Dive in. And 2, how the author has expressed things is amazing or brilliant. No questions. They said it perfectly and fluently and beautifully. Never going to question it my entire life. Then you got the doubting game. This is where you all love it. The doubting game is where you're that harsh critic and you're looking at it, you're like, I don't believe this. You're going to look for factual shortcomings and flaws in their logical discussions. Look for ideas and assumptions a skeptical reader would reject. So if you sit there and say, so what? Who cares? Why would the author do that? Those are ways that you're doubting it, and that's a great way to look at something. When you say so what and they can't answer the so what, that shows you there may be an issue in the argument there. And again, annotate the text. Give yourself time while reading to highlight key parts. Take notes. This will help you go back later and find passages and your thoughts and remarks about them. When you're annotating and taking notes, remember you're not only looking through the text, but also looking at it. Why are they writing this? What is the importance of it? The fourth one is analyzing the proofs in the text. All texts are argumentative in some way because the authors are trying to indirectly or directly make claims that they want you to believe. Even if you look at things like advertisements, they're making an argument. I want you to believe that this is the best thing in the world and buy it. Come over. So your claims are going to be based on 3 different proofs. There's ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethos is authority. Logos is reasoning. Pathos is emotions. And we'll come back to those in a little bit. The 5th one is you're going to contextualize the text. So all authors are going to be influenced by the cultural, ethical, and political events that were happening around them when they were writing. You need to look back at those things to better understand why the text was written, especially if it's an older text. If it is new, you kind of have it like currently written, you kind of understand what's going on now. So you don't have to be like, well, what's going on then? Then you're going to analyze your own beliefs and assumptions. Some questions to ask yourself when analyzing your own beliefs while reading is how did my first reaction influence my overall interpretation of the text? How did my personal beliefs influence how I interpreted and reacted to the author's claims and proofs? How did my personal values cause me to react favorably to some parts and unfavorably to other parts of the text? Why exactly was I pleased with or irritated by some parts of this text? Have my views changed now that I have finished reading and analyzing the text? Being able to reflect back on your assumptions and beliefs is tough because we do not like questioning our own assumptions and beliefs. You are going to rely on these when you're trying to be unbiased or impartial, but you have to reflect on them. If a text, something you read, challenges your assumptions, that is a good thing. As a writer yourself, you are trying to challenge, influence, inform, and entertain your readers, all of those things. If you're challenging somebody's beliefs, you want them to, in the long run, agree with you. Therefore, if you disagree with what somebody wrote, you need to step back and be respectful and treat other authors and their ideas with the same respect and open-mindedness that you want from somebody. So keep that in mind. Last but not least, you're going to respond to the text. After employing these other strategies, you respond to the text itself. Ask yourself questions like, was your initial response accurate? How does the text meet your purposes? What are you going to use it for? Does it? How well did the text follow the genre? If it's an argument, does it follow the genre of arguments? If it's an analysis, a critique, does it follow those? How should you reread the text? And I know some of you are going, I'm only going to read something once. Sometimes you need to read it more than once, guys. It's kind of the part of being in college, and it stinks, but it happens. Use critical reading to strengthen your writing. You need to be able to look at somebody's stuff critically and understand it, because you are going to want to use potential writing styles and strategies your own way that somebody else uses. And that's fine. You can model your writing after somebody else's. There's no shame in that. Critical reading is going to be important throughout your time in college and your career. It's going to help you develop your ideas in your own projects, but you also need to be able to use it in your own writing, okay? It's going to be key in making your stuff. Now I want to talk about rhetorical analysis specifically. We talked about all the critical things. These things are what's going to help you do and engage in rhetorical analysis. So when is rhetorical analysis itself used? Let's go back to this one. We'll talk about the other one in just a second. What is rhetorical announcement used for? Why do I, or you, need to do this? I know that's what's going through your head right now. Why do I need to engage in rhetorical analysis, Ms. Cravens? And I know rhetorical analysis sounds intimidating. A lot of these words are words you've never heard before. It's not intimidating, though. You are engaging in rhetorical analysis pretty much daily. When you decide to buy a product based on an ad or see a movie because the trailer for it was awesome or not, that is where you're engaging in rhetorical analysis. So let's talk about one of the key components to rhetorical analysis, which is the 3 proofs. And we mentioned these before a couple of times already, but this is where we're going to delve into them and get into the discussion of them. So your first proof is going to be ethos. Ethos is highlighting the use of credibility, ethics. There are 8 ways that you can use ethos in analysis and even in argument, but we'll talk about them in argument later on. Ethos, though, is going to be using somebody's reputation, experience, and values to support an argument or a claim. So you're going to use somebody's credibility or your own credibility, depending on if you are an expert in that field or not, to support the argument you're making. And there's 8 ways to do this. So you can use personal experience. For those of you, most of you are in college right now for different reasons. If somebody says, why would you go to college here? Then you're going to use your personal experience about why you chose to go here. You can use somebody's personal credentials. This doctor is the best doctor for a blank. This is why you should listen to them. Somebody may have good moral character. Their morals align very well, and you want to use that to make a point. You may appeal to experts. A lot of the times when you are engaging in ethos and making claims or arguments, you're going to appeal to an expert for something. You can make an identification with the readers. I am also from the country, from a very small town. You are from the country, from a very small town. You should believe me. You may admit your limitations. I know that I am not fully familiar with this, but I am familiar with this aspect, and therefore I can expand upon it and make it better. You may give them an expression of goodwill, or you may use what is called insider language. That is the language of the area being used. This advertisement that is on screen specifically is using the personal credentials of a dentist to sell the product itself. It states that it is the #1 dentist recommended brand for sensitive teeth down here, and it has a dentist here who is saying, I recommend Sensodyne. Now, when you look at this, you may say, well, dentists say I should use it, so therefore I do. But you have to keep in mind, not everything that uses ethos is reliable, because is that actually a dentist? I don't know if they still do it now, but there used to be like 4 out of 5 dentists recommend. Well, you know how they get that number? They just go in and they say, hey, here's 10 dentists. We're going to ask all of them these questions. And then they'll take the one that doesn't agree and the 4 that do. And they'll say, well, 4 out of 5 of them recommended it. So you kind of have to be critical of these things. Just keep that in mind. But ethos is the credibility, and that's what you're going to use very heavily in your arguments. But a lot of people do use ethos in arguments as well, or in selling their advertisements. And that's what you need to look for, because you are going to be doing an ad critique. Are they using somebody's credibility? The person, even if they're not like a doctor, are they using somebody that you know, somebody that's famous to sell a product? And a lot of companies do that. Then we have logos, which is reasoning, the use of reasoning in arguments. Logos is going to appeal to somebody's common sense, their beliefs, or even their values. This is going to involve logic, but it's also going to appeal to common sense and use examples to demonstrate that point. So common sense things. You know better than to run out in the middle of a busy highway. That's logic, right? There are 8 ways to influence beliefs and opinions through logos. You can use if-then arguments, which is if you want to go to school without going into any debt, then you will definitely want to go to A and C. So if and then. Either-or arguments. Either you like Papa John's or you like Domino's. Very black and white argument. Cause and effect. So that is where you're saying that doing one thing is going to end up affecting another. An example is the overconsumption of plastic will deplete our fossil fuels over time, and at some point we will no longer have fossil fuels to rely on. Cause and effect. Overconsumption, depletion, not having them anymore. Then you have cost and benefits. This is something that a lot of you did when you were deciding whether you wanted to go to a 4-year first or start with a 2-year and then switch to a 4-year if you're doing a 4-year degree. A&C offers cheap classes, so it'd be beneficial to get your associates there so you don't have to worry about taking out a loan. Cost and benefits. Better and worse. That is the very black and white. Popeyes is better than KFC. You can also use examples, bring out facts and data. That's the best thing for logos, is actually using data and numbers and studies. And then you may use an anecdote, a story. That's also reasoning. But you want to rely more on the beautiful, wonderful data in your own arguments. And they may use data in arguments, but you have to say, can I trust it? And last but not least, the one that we are also familiar with is pathos. Well, let me talk about the reasoning in this one. Sorry, guys. So if you look at this one, you may say, Ms. Cravens, there's no reasoning in it. But there is reasoning. It says, if you open a Coke, then there will be happiness. That's logical reasoning for them, right? It's a very basic advertisement, but it says a lot. And now we're going to go to the pathos. And some of y'all were probably just terrorized right then. But pathos is emotions. That is where you use feelings, desires, or fears to influence readers. Emotions and pathos should be used sparingly in arguments because it can be manipulative. There are 8 basic emotions that exist. There's joy, acceptance, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, and rejection. Some of you are looking at this ad and you may be feeling quite a few emotions. Let's talk about why this advertisement specifically is a problem and not to be trusted. It elicits emotions from you, showing a man holding a skinned lamb that's dead. So you may be feeling angry. And it says, here's the rest of your wool coat. Now, it is very intentionally doing this to make you feel anger about, well, that's awful that they killed that thing for the wool. That's not how wool coats are made. This is a manipulative advertisement because it's relying on a shock value to make you angry. In fact, if you know anything about sheep and lambs, you know that you don't kill them to get their wool. It's counterintuitive. It's counterproductive because wool is just hair. We trim our own hair. We cut our own hair. That's what you do with lambs. Some lambs, if they are not cut after a while, the weight of their wool can kill them. So you have to do it. They need to be sheared down. This is very manipulative though, and therefore you have to be careful when emotions are used. Now, visual emotions can be used like this, or you may have other emotions, like audio emotions. Many of you might be familiar with the ASPCA commercials, where they use In the Arms of the Angels by Sarah McLachlan. Those are manipulating you to feel bad, to donate. So keep that in mind. Music is also a way to manipulate people. You don't want to do it, but they do it sometimes. Now let's talk about the actual essay itself. You are going to be doing what is referred to as an ad critique. This is where you are going to engage in the microgenre of analysis by looking at an advertisement, video or printed. I prefer video. I'll say that right now. I prefer you to find a video advertisement on YouTube that is an actual advertisement, not something made up, that exists. You have many options in terms of advertisements. YouTube has pretty much every commercial that probably exists is out there. And you are going to argue and evaluate whether or not the ad is effective in selling their product. That is your argument. The ad is or is not effective in selling the product. If you think it's effective, you're going to argue, yes, it is effective. If you think it's not effective, you'll argue, no, it is not effective. And sometimes the ad may be effective in doing one thing, but not doing what it was meant to do. Keep that in mind. If the ad is effective, you're going to show the reader why it works. If it's not, explain why it's not effective. Your audience are your peers, but it's also people who are going to be consuming the mass media and products. So this is one reason why I said use video advertisements. It's much easier to do. And the Super Bowl's coming up. There's so many Super Bowl commercials that are out there that are weird and wacky, and you can use those. A lot of great commercials out there for this. Let's look at how, okay, I went over this already, but again, the ad critique is going to analyze and evaluate an advertisement to show why it was or was not effective. Keep that in mind. So, the layout. You're going to have the introduction, which is going to pull your reader in, start with that broad discussion of the topic, and then narrow down. Don't start telling me about the ad in the introduction. I don't want to hear about it. Then you're going to have your thesis statement. Last sentence of your introduction, an argumentative claim of whether or not the ad is effective. So the ad is effective because blank. The ad is not effective because blank. You don't have to put because. This advertisement is not effective. There you go. This advertisement is effective in selling the product. There's your thesis. Then you're going to have, as the second paragraph of your essay, what is going to be a summary of the ad. So you are going to write me a detailed descriptive paragraph about what happens in the ad or what the ad looks like from beginning to end. You used descriptive writing in your last essay. You are still employing it in this essay. That second paragraph, you're going to pretend like I will never see this ad. So I need to know from beginning to end what's going on. Paint me a picture, a visual picture. Then you're going to explain the 3 proofs: ethos, logos, and pathos. Each proof may or may not be used in the ad. If it is, you're going to tell me how it's used and give specific examples. If you say they are using somebody's credibility, let's use one of like the old Got Milk ads. They're very old, by the way. Usually they use actors or athletes. I was going to call them sports people. They use athletes for those. You look at those and you say, okay, if they use an athlete, why use an athlete? Who's this athlete? What does he do? Why is he important at this time? Give me the specific examples. Don't just say, well, they use Michael Jordan and he's an athlete. Okay, not everybody knows who Michael Jordan is. I know you're probably saying, yes, they do, Ms. Cravens. But not everybody does. So you have to explain to your reader why this thing is important. Why is he a credible person to them to use? You will start out each paragraph of the proof about what the proof is. Ethos is the use of credibility in arguments. This advertisement uses ethos by blank. If it doesn't use the proof, you will not have that paragraph. So the total amount of paragraphs you may have, total for this essay: introduction, summary, body paragraph if it only uses 1 proof, conclusion, 4. If it uses 2 of the proofs, you'll have 5. If it uses all 3, you'll have 6. Okay? Keep that in mind. Introduction is its own paragraph. Summary is its own paragraph. Each proof and how it's used in the specific examples is its own paragraph. And then you'll have the conclusion, where you're going to explain whether or not the ad is effective. Because the ad uses this, it is an effective way to sell the product. Because the ad doesn't use this, it's not effective. If you would like to include in another paragraph, if it doesn't use a proof, that it could be beneficial to use that proof, you can. But please just focus the argument solely on what it is using and how it's using it and why. You will have a works cited page for this. Now, you are not doing any citations in the argument, but this is going to be practice for the argumentative works cited page that you're doing. Okay? If you're using a YouTube video, there's a very specific citation format that you will use for this, and I will show you. The formatting is the same for every essay: Times New Roman 12-point font, double spacing, indented paragraphs, 1-inch margins, MLA first page formatting. Okay? Your works cited page is its own page. The actual essay is 2.5, 2 pages, plus the works cited page. Okay? If you have any questions, please make sure you put them in your discussions, or you can ask them now. You will be reading a student example. The student example, the writing style may be a little drab and a little boring. I understand that. But look at how he pulls specific examples from the advertisement he's using to make his argument. Okay? He says it uses this. He pulls specific ones and explains how that applies to it. I'm going to be doing a very short little video over a breakdown, handout, to kind of help work you through it. You are more than welcome to use that kind of format to help draft and then write your rough draft. You don't have to do that though. But there will be another video kind of explaining, especially the works cited citation. Again, you will not be doing citations in the text. You will just have the page. But I want you to start preparing and understanding how to do that page. Have fun with this, guys. This is going to be a great one. Have fun picking out your advertisement. Don't feel worried or ashamed about man, I don't know if I should use that advertisement or not, Miss Cravens. Do it. Look forward to seeing which ones you pick out, guys. See you later.